So here's our setup, as I guess you'd call this a jig, but so that we got this thing ready to weld now, and we've got it held in place. I'm going to explain to you a couple of things that I've done here so that you understand. It's fairly critical that you have these things lined up correctly. Obviously somebody has driven this one a whole lot with it misaligned, because that's why we had the problem that we had on it. But if you're going to put it back together, you might as well do it correctly. So what we've done, we've clamped it into this piece of angle iron here, and by using those clamps to hold it in the bottom of the angle, it keeps it aligned in a straight line there, and that's really what I'm after there. It's kind of wrestling around here. It took quite a bit of effort to get it to, to get it exactly where I wanted it. I've kept myself with a little bit of gap here so I can actually see the bolt down in there, so I'm making sure that I get welded to it, as well as to both layers of pipe here. Remember, I've got the old sleeve in there still and the main piece of pipe, so I'm going to have all three of those layers welded together, and then we're going to go down in here and plug weld those up, which will again weld all three of those pieces together and help hold it stable. And then the last thing that I did, you'll notice I've got it sitting up on two 2x4s here. Now, why did I do that? And that's because when you clamp that thing down in there, it doesn't necessarily keep this side, oh, that was good, perfectly lined up with the other side. Alright, hold on a second. I get my 2x4 set back up here. Sorry for that. But if I don't do that, then I can't explain what I did. Alright. There you go. Hope that was exciting for you, because all you get to do is see my messy workbench. Anyway, by getting that set up on that board, so I've got it so now that I'm flat here, so that this piece of tubing that has the bolt going through it is perfectly flat on this 2x4. And then over at the other end, I've got the same thing. So this piece of tubing, the cross piece, is perfectly flat on that 2x4. Now, if I come up under here, you can see I don't have any gaps where I've got light showing through there. And the same thing over here. It's sitting both flat on both of those pieces of 2x4. So now I know that my ends are aligned, that this thing can move up and down, and those bolts will stay perfectly parallel in that process. So I am all ready now to hook this thing up to the welder and get those pieces welded together. So I'm going to do that off camera and come back here and show you the end result. Alright, my friends, there you go. We have our nice, freshly repaired and straightened, turned around 180 degrees, new control arm. And just give you a little close up here. You can see I smoothed the welds up with the grinder and then went over it with the wire wheel, and so it's not perfect like a new piece of tubing would be. And if I was shooting for a real pro quality restoration here, first of all, I probably wouldn't have done this. I would have tried to find another one, or had another one fabricated for me. But anyway, it's going to be just fine for what I need. Again, it's back down underneath the car where nobody's going to see it. And so I'm going to get it on there and spray some more green paint on it, and that will pretty much get me back to rolling chassis stage. So I have a couple other things I'm going to wrap up here kind of in this segment. One of the things I'll do is paint these two chassis braces here, which I never did get around to painting because I needed them in and I didn't have them painted. So we'll probably do that. I'm going to bolt my rear suspension all back together and take my wooden jig that I made here in an earlier segment to hold the rear end. I'm going to get it put back in there, get my other tire on, and then I will be able to actually drop this puppy down on the ground and roll it around. That's exciting. It surely hasn't done that in many years. I actually don't know how long they've had this apart, but my guess would be probably 10 to 15 years that it's been sitting. So pretty exciting and fun. It's been one massive jigsaw puzzle up to this point, but I think we got her back together for the chassis part. So we'll be back when we get her in place here. All right, kind of wrap up here and show you how things turned out. There's my new control arm on there, fastened back. We got the suspension hanging back in place. The reason that I don't have my wooden bracket back in there yet is that I put some fresh paint on that control arm, as well as came in here and painted these two engine compartment braces. So I need to let them sit and dry good before I go doing that. But I was able to do that. Came over here, got my other tire back on, and so we are now sitting here with 4 wheels on this thing. And once I put that wooden bracket back in, we are going to be rollable. And that's a huge step forward on this thing. Probably at this point I'm going to get it down on the ground and just to see if it will actually sit there on its own, which I'm pretty sure it will. But that's where we're at. It's come along great. I'm really excited that we've got this far. You can see, I think I showed you a lot of this earlier, but you can see a lot of the detail in there of the shifter mechanism and our brake lines and things like that. I think I talked about putting these cooling tubes in there. I did that several episodes ago, but I don't know that I actually ever took a video of it. So I'll tell you a couple of things here that I learned. These things have back in there, they go, you can barely see it in there. Any place they go through a bulkhead, a metal firewall there is a rubber grommet that fills those holes up. And I don't know, yeah, you can see the other one down there. And then when you come around here to the front of the car, where they come out through there, you've got rubber grommets on both of them there too. And what I found is those things are pretty tight fitting. And so just a clue that I figured out here is that they didn't want to go in there on their own. They would go a certain amount, and then the friction of the pipe sliding through there would actually pull the grommet inside. It would push it on through and get it out of the hole, and it was out of place. So I had to rethink that. And what I did, I ended up putting Vaseline all over the rubber part of the grommet, and then got my WD-40 out and just sprayed the heck out of the pipe. I coated the pipe good with it so that it would slide through there, and that actually worked. Got everything to where it slid through. I was able to keep them in place, and up here at the front, when I got here, I had to get an assistant to help me put some pressure on them at the back while I guided them through, but they came through, and all seemed to be working out just fine. So I'll probably come in here and wipe the Vaseline off with some kind of degreaser so that the hoses tend to stay on better. But that was one of the pieces that I'm quite sure that I didn't document with a video yet. So I think that's kind of one of my last big wrap-up pieces here. At some point in time, I will have to put some coolant hoses on stuff, and part of the reason that I haven't yet is because I'm not totally sure where they go. I'm going to do a little more studying on that, and I don't know if I'll do that before I get around to getting the body in here or not. I might. I just haven't really thought about it for a little while. So I do know that there's a couple of them that I think there's a crossover tube down in here, and there's another one that goes from this up to another tube that you can't see here. I believe those are just directly connected, but I will do a little more checking and figuring that out. But those are really about the only other things that I can do at this point, I think. So yeah, that's probably where we're at right now. But we'll be back. I wanted to throw this in as a wrap-up to that control arm video, and then once I've got it all back on the ground, rollable, then I'll come out and wrap up with a final chassis video on it.